Hello and welcome to the Wednesday check-in for Bitcoin here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is October 23rd, 2024. We're currently in the Thursday candle. It's a little late on Wednesday for me, still here on the west coast of the US. But I wanted to show you a few things to be aware of, kind of following up with where we left off on Monday's video. Bitcoin did put in that daily high, and it has moved down to test the top side of the weekly in that zone between 64.5 and $65,500. So kind of towards the top side of that number that I kind of threw out there on Monday. It has gotten a nice lower term time frame bounce. But I wanted to kind of point out what I was talking about on the weekly and why it's pretty important. So when you look at the weekly, this is something I've described quite a bit. This chart I made up for a few Spaces events where I was sharing it around as a public chart. And, it's just kind of describing what's going on the weekly in a visual format with some zones of interest and kind of pointing out the actual trending structure on the weekly. So, from the higher high to the higher low to the lower highs, lower low, lower high, lower low, we had that lower high with, of course, the lower high close. Now, this lower high was the $65,000 lower high. That was essentially the first top from 2021 that was retested. Bitcoin dumped out to the 52.5 roughly higher low wick with the lower low close. Now, when I talk about trend reversal setups, this is still a trend reversal setup. Yes, this is now an uptrend. We have a higher high. We saw the close above $65,000 at 65,600 or so, with the higher high wick or swing put in at 66,550. And then we got the nice higher low. And you might remember from some of my videos where I was like, hey, we saw the higher low swing with the lower low close. So at minimum, what I needed to see from there is a higher low swing on the weekly and preferably a higher low close. We've now gotten that. And that was coming into the current weekly. So last week closed nicely, nice little up candle, and even closed the above the actual close open here at 68,244. We have now gotten a back test in the Monday to Tuesday candle right into that higher high weekly structure at 65,600 to around that 66,550. Of course, it did test down to a low of 65,150, but that's pretty much splitting the difference between the zone of interest that we were calling out on Monday, or I was calling out on Monday, between 64.5 to 65.5. And I want to show you how clean this was. And one of the reasons why I talk so much about, these longer term time frame horizontal support and resistance as they relate to the daily time frame horizontal support and resistance, because it is really important when I talk about these zones of interest to understand kind of why. When you have this historical area that gets back tested like this, I want to point you to the hourly as it relates to this weekly chart here. You can see that after Bitcoin put in the Monday high up here, essentially a little bit of a front run of that 69,640 to $70,000 region, where we have basically a region of interest overhead. For resistance, initially we want to see the bulls regain it between, essentially you can call it 70,000 to 72. It's somewhere around on the weekly time frame, 69,637 in this case to 71,974. So essentially it's 70 to 72 on most charts, but here on spot it's a little bit shy of those numbers. We saw a little bit of a front run heading into that overhead resistance, right? It came down, perfectly tagged the higher high break on the weekly. So that previous higher high break there at that 66,550 got a little bit of a lower term time frame bounce on, like the 5-minute and 15-minute, and then just kind of hung around here and went sideways before breaking down and swinging below the close open higher high structure there at that 65,600. Nice, beautiful close open right on it. And then it moved back to the top side, breaks through, shows that it, price can close above, back tests it, and now it's kind of right up against this local hourly resistance. So I wouldn't be surprised if it dipped down again. The criteria right now for some of the lower term time frame stuff is, break below this low at around that 65 150, and I'd be looking for continuation down to test, the daily stuff that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. To go and test the 68 250 basically just needs to break out of this structure, and the high side of this structure is somewhere around $68,000, so about a $250 range. I'd expect that to get tested. You can see how there was some oscillating price action around that weekly area, which is a close open as well. So anywhere above there, and I'm looking again 68 to roughly $70,000, or mid $69,000 region again, to run this high into the actual overhead resistance. Anywhere above there, I'm looking for this area to be an area of interest between, again, 70 and 72, and then 72 to the actual all-time high area. So 72 to 73.835, or 73 to 75 as like an overall area of resistance overhead. I'll talk a little bit more about that on Friday. I do have to give you a reason to actually watch Friday, right? So let's go ahead back to the weekly here, and we'll turn off this chart here. I have been sharing this chart around on X, so you can kind of just go through my replies. If you'd like this chart, you can just click on it and save it for yourself. If you would want to kind of copy what this is, I'm not going to go over in detail like everything here. For those that are brand new, it's actually pretty straightforward. It is a simplified chart. It's not showing you all of the weekly resistances and supports, stuff like that. It's just kind of the relevant stuff as it relates to what we talked about on Monday. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And let's go ahead and turn on our daily accumulation distribution zones. Let's go to the daily because this is pretty important. I had mentioned for trending structure here on the daily that I wanted to see, coming off of this shorter term time frame downtrend, which was threatening a trend reversal, that held up beautifully right there on the close open on the daily at that 60,263 or 60,000 2 to 3 level. We had a trend break back to the upside. So what do we need to see? We need to see higher low structure build from there, preferably on a close. We do have some swing highs to swing low. So swing high, higher. This was a higher high close technically on the swing. It wasn't actually a closing high though, right? But it was a nice little swing lower high to swing higher low, swing higher high, swing higher low. And then we had our swing high to swing lower low in this case. But I'm not really, this is just one move on a closing basis. So what I need to see from here is, if this is going to be like a higher low, I need to see price on the daily closing above this low now. And of course, that's the low that I just pointed out on that other horizontal support and resistance chart based on the weekly. This is around 65 150. So if it's going to put the low in, I need to see it close above the Tuesday high. So this little doji candle that was holding on to the top side here at 67,272, I need to see this closed above to confirm this as a higher low swing and a higher low close. So in this case, we're talking about, let's see, that's going to be 67,800. And he closes above there. This will be a higher low, and I would need to see Bitcoin, of course, regain the essentially 68 to 68.3 here, and then take out its most recent high at 69.5 to go run around 70,000 to 70,100. So on the daily, this is a little bit different because there is daily zones of interest, right? Above 70,000, essentially, I'm looking up to $71.5, $72,000. Somewhere around the run the high zone here, where where the double top came in and this close came in at 71.5 to 72. So this kind of no man's land between 70 and 72,000, and then above there, I'm looking for the all-time high and higher. Initially 73 to 75, 75, 78, 78 to 80, mid to low 80s from there. Then we're looking at the upper 80s to $90,000 region and above 90,000 probably pretty quickly, heading to try the mid 90 to $100,000 range. But we'll talk about that when Bitcoin actually begins to break out again and go into blue sky territory. To the downside, this is a nice pullback. It's pulled back to our areas of interest, and I would like to see it kind of hold this area if it's going to remain bullish for immediate continuation back to the highs. If we see a lower high come in on the daily right around this resistance, or we see a swing above that can't close above 69.5, just be aware again of this low. We still need to be aware of this low in the context of this move down thus far. But if we see a low set and it hasn't already run the highs, so again, that's above 68,700 here, the Tuesday candle high. If we see a low set on the daily and it hasn't yet run the highs, just be aware that we need to see the closes above that 69.5 and to get continuation immediately. Otherwise, I would still give it some time, but just be aware of any lower highs that come in or any swing fails of this 69.5 high, even into $70,000. Kind of like what we saw over here, where it did close higher right up against the resistance, but we threw the higher high at $70,000 even there, and then we were looking like, hey, this low was the low to hold. It did not hold. Price nuked, right? So we just need to be aware of scenarios like that. But so far, so good for the bulls. They've been fighting pretty well. You can even see in the lower term timeframes how the 67,272, which is, of course, again, the first major lower high of a downtrending structure within this overall range. Yes, we had lower highs in the context of an uptrending structure, but this was a very significant first lower high. And, we saw it as resistance when retesting it from the bottom side. We saw it as support from the top side. We saw the first major lower high of the second downtrend. We saw how it tried to hold it on a close open, lost it, retested it perfectly, and then boom, down. So we just need to be aware of this kind of stuff. One of the things that I wanted to look at here, because I wasn't quite sure, because I was looking at different charts, not because I don't directly trade Coinbase, but I wanted to see on some charts it did hit this high region around 64.5, and it didn't. It did not. Of course, I wanted to double check that this was, 65,000, and see where this high was. It's at 65,050. So it did get front run by like $100 here on Coinbase spot. There is an area of interest if this does continue down below 65. 150 here at this low. There is an area of interest around this high to this spike high at 64.5 and even 63.5, as long as we don't see Bitcoin losing 64.5 on a close, and especially 63.5 on a close, then it's still looking good. It's in higher low territory as long as it's above this last low still down here. As it stands right now. As long as it's above the 60,000 2 to 300 close and the 58,863 low. So I would be looking for higher lows above there, and pretty straightforward stuff, to be honest with you. So we kind of talked about trend and support and resistance already. Let's go ahead and take a look at volatility. I noted that Bitcoin losing the upper first, which was right here on the close open on Monday into Tuesday. It was right at that 67,272. Well, Bitcoin went sideways and down, and we have seen the upper first pass it. Now the basis band is quickly heading up to, it's actually right at that low at around, it's actually right here. Hold on, let me get the, 1 second. Let me turn on the magnet. So it's actually, the basis perfectly lined up with this high right here at $65,050. Good candidate to be retested. Yesterday's, Wednesday, which is still Wednesday for me, we did see it, throw a wick at it. And quite honestly, if it does get tested again, great. That's fine. If we don't see closes below, very good. It can test down as far as it wants. but we don't want to see closes below for the integrity of this move. We are in mean reversion territory already, and we've seen the mean reversion to the basis. And realistically, I wouldn't want to see this in today or even tomorrow's candle, but realistically, it can test all the way down to the lower first off of a move like this and still maintain the integrity of structure from a volatility standpoint. But from support and resistance, any closes below 63.8, not going to look great for the bulls. And I talked about why on the weekly, and we'll even revisit that before I wrap up here. But it looks fine. Retest back up to the upper first. Just be aware that is going to be an area of resistance for volatility, and it's just right around the 68 to 68.3 overhead resistance. So just be aware of that in the lower term timeframes. It's also right around where we would want to see price closing above to set this as a higher low closing structure and swing structure. And that's right around that 67,800. Anywhere above there, from a volatility standpoint, the highs in play at 69.5 to 70,000, 70,200, and even the upper second in no man's land up there, coming in just shy of 70,800 at 70,736. So, excuse me. Oh, I couldn't hold that cough. My bad. If Bitcoin does push up through the zone, this will adjust to price live, and it's probably going to be somewhere around 71. Really aggressive, and we would see it likely around the overhead resistance at 71.5 or so. But, looks good. There's nothing wrong with this move so far. I know some people are getting a little freaked out. Just be aware of lower highs and be aware of swing fails of the 69.5 high that fell to close above on the daily. That's all. And to the downside, just be aware of possible continuation on any closes, even in lower term timeframes below 65,150. Then we can just look back to 64.5, even 63.8. As long as we're not seeing any closes below 63.8 to 64.5, the bulls still have the ball in their court. Any lower than that, and it's a little concerning for the bulls. At least at minimum, we'd be looking for further downside, and then we'd have to reevaluate structurally what's going on. All right, let's take a look at momentum. We talked about trend, support and resistance, and volatility. Let's take a look at daily momentum. Momentum is turned to the downside on any closes below $69,000, which of course is the prior cycle all-time high. So any closes above there, we will see a regular stoke like this turn back to the upside, and that would look pretty good. From the current moves structure, there's nothing going on here to be talking about in terms of RSI. I'm seeing a lot of there's bearish divergence between. Yes, if you have your look back period on long enough, this high right here, the bearish divergence is gonna, it is gonna be in play. Actually, no, because it's the close, not the swing. No, actually, I don't think that it would even throw. I'd have to think about this harder. I don't think it would be throwing a hidden bear div. Even if there was one to populate its corrective, and we've already seen this move already in play. I do want to call out a few areas of interest on RSI here. So the edge of the bullish control zone here is going to be 67,900. So that's about $100 above the Tuesday candle. And that's going to be, what did I just goofed that up, huh? Let's go ahead and let's go back a bit here. So that's going to be just above the 67,800. So pushing back into the edge of the bearish control zone, or bearish. It's the bullish control zone. Pushing back into the edge of the bullish control zone would put price above this Tuesday high. And if we see closes in there, that will set a higher low in place. And let's go ahead and really quickly look at where the SMA is here. SMA is at 68,431. So that's going to be right around or just inside of the run the highs above here zone. And we do need to call out where the midline is and the edge of the bearish control zone is. So midline is at 64,891, so right below $65,000. And the edge of the bearish control zone is going to be around 60,800. So, the scale midline is a little bit more relevant if price starts to lose 150. Bearish control zone, I'm not really looking at as being viable, at least for today's candle. We'll find out. I've been wrong on that before. But, nothing too crazy going on here, to be quite honest. Let's take a look at the 4-hour real quick. Oops. That's the landing bands. So that's the settings for the landing bands, which you can get in the bit.ly link in my X profile for free, or you can get it in the video link in the description down below on YouTube. You can see that the 4-hour, after losing the basis band, got a little bit of expansion to the downside and is retesting the basis band and the overhead resistance right now at that 67,272. If it starts to crack above, I'd look for somewhere around the upper first to upper second, wherever that ends up, which is likely going to be right around the top side of, 68,000 to 68.3 here. Any close, excuse me. Wow. I'm going to lose my voice and everything. Maybe I'll grow a few inches, hitting puberty all over again. If we do start seeing it crack back into the 68 to 68.3 area here, where this line is, then I would look for the highs to get ran somewhere around that 69 to 69.5. And then above, I'd be looking for expansion up to the, 70,000, 70,200 area and above. Let's go ahead and just quickly take a look at momentum. 65,350 is going to be the number to hold for the next 4-hour candle. I think it's probably more relevant to take a look at the 12-hour. So the 12-hour is throwing a continuation drive of bullish divergence, otherwise known as a hidden bull div here. Very nice. We see expansion to compression. Bitcoin has held the lower first on a close open basis, a nice wick down to the lower second. This is what I like to see on mean reversion, especially for the 12-hour after a nice big move up like this. Mean revert back to the lower first and don't close below, even throwing wicks at the lower second. Love to see it. It can hang out here. It's pretty obvious if we start getting closes back below the lower second, and then of course back below 65,150, we're looking for expansion back to the downside because we are getting compression right now. To the upside, take out the highs on a closing basis, or the upper second here, right around 69,166, and then 69.5 would be the additional criteria to meet for expansion to the upside, kind of like a price replace band scenario where the upper third is around that 70,000 to 70,200 over here. And if it did start closing above there, I'd be looking for expansion up into the all-time high zone there, $71.5, $72,000 to 73,835 and above. So I like the setup here. Is it front runnable? I'd just be careful. Stoke is entering the bearish control zone, closes above 67,800 or so, would turn that back up. That might be relevant for you, as this 12-hour candle does have 7 hours and 21 minutes to go. So that might be relevant for some of you to pay attention to. If Bitcoin doesn't close above around that 67,800 or so, then this, and it's still holding this zone, we'll see that number drop dramatically somewhere around where it's trading 67,000 to even maybe just below $67,000 for the pivot there. It has not confirmed the bullish divergence here. In order to confirm the bullish divergence for the 12-hour and set a low, we need to see the Tuesday open 12-hour candle here, this bearish candle closed above, and that's at 67,400. So right around 67,400, it just got ran in the lower term time frames. And, that would set the low. That would lock in the continuation drive for bullish divergence there. And at minimum, we'd be targeting the overhead resistance to the highs. Any breakouts above there, we're getting continuation higher. All right. Let's go back and just talk about the weekly before I let you go here. And this will wrap things up for today's video. So let's go ahead and turn off accumulation distribution. Let's go ahead and turn on the weekly chart that I showed just a moment ago. And we'll get rid of the landing bands here. Now, what the bulls want to see is closes maintain above this close open here. That's just vital, right? And that's 62,800, almost 62,900 on some charts. So the reason why you want to see weekly closes above here, and really any price action that goes sideways and down, doesn't matter that much unless we see, a high, this bearish candle get broken down and this high is put in. Then we definitely have to be aware of the 62,800. But for this week, you want to see close above 62,800. Looks fine. Strong above the 65,600 to 66,550. Again, we're talking about weekly closes. So I will follow up with this on Friday, and we'll talk a little bit more about this chart. We'll get into maybe some fibs if it's appropriate for the setup on the daily and longer term timeframes. And then we'll talk about what criteria I'm going to be watching for over the weekend. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.